All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the November 6th special meeting of the Housing and Community Development Committee. Can I have some help from staff to get a roll call, please?
Chair Burns. Councilmember Isles.
Here.
Councilmember Harkars.
Here.
Councilmember Rogers.
Here.
Committee Member King.
Here.
Committee Member Murray.
Here.
Committee Member Nitamari.
Here.
Committee Member Sweeney. Committee Member Zalomi.
Here.
Seeing we have a quorum and we're ready to do our work, we will start off our meeting. First item on our list of agenda items is public comment. Everyone will have 2 minutes of public comment, and we will start off with folks who signed up in person to speak in person. And we'll have Frank Hill, and he will be followed by Roger Williams.
Good evening. Just want to make a brief comment. 2 minutes, you said? My name is Frank Hill. I'm Vice President of the Board of Rezoning for Better Evanston. I sent a letter to y'all earlier today, which hopefully was delivered and may not have had time to read it yet. The suggestions that we had in there were regarding funding in the SHP. That one idea could be to borrow against Northwestern University's Ryan Field CBA affordable housing funding so that the funds are available as soon as possible to address the housing affordability crisis. The details of that proposal are in that letter. That there be an apportioned part of the property tax increase, which likely is coming. I know the budget battle isn't even started yet, but a portion of sunset provisioned percentage increase of property tax to fund affordable housing, construction, rehab, pilot programs, and borrow against that increase. And a proposed initiative that we had in that letter was to create a community land trust plus an ADU, as is being done in Durham, North Carolina. Their program is called CLT plus one, where the homeowner owns the home as well as the ADU, and is the landlord for the ADU at an affordable rate. So it provides 2 units of affordable housing and creates a income stream for the homeowner. Financial assistance for building, and then these were some of the things that weren't in the letter yet. Financial assistance for building new ADUs to offer as affordable rentals. So if the agreement was that the owner would provide them as affordable, then assistance with building them. Rehab assistance for older homes. Shoot. Okay, and I will include the rest in a written comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Roger Williams, followed by Eric Passett.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Roger Williams. I'm an Evanston realtor and the president of Rezoning for a Better Evanston. We are formally requesting that this body explicitly mandates by right development be woven into the core strategies of the strategic housing plan. This mandate must specifically cover critical housing types such as including multi-unit, accessory dwelling units, and missing middle homes. Currently, without guaranteed by right provisions, even the most essential and modest projects are subjected to discretionary delays and political opposition. This opposition actively undermines our stated goals of improving affordability. Adopting this change is the single most important step to streamline the approval process, ensure predictability for builders and residents, and finally, make Evanston's ambitious housing goals feasible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Eric Passett, followed by Kristen White.
Well, I'm Eric Passett, and I'm the owner of North Shore Apartments and Condos and a resident of the 4th Ward. and I came and spoke, I don't know if it was 2 weeks ago. I understand that the discussion's going to come up again for just cause as to be part of the rezoning. And we had extensive discussion about this about a year or so ago in the RO2 laws and all that. And I can tell you from the landlord's point of view, and just tell you a little bit about a history of my company and what we do, but we manage and rent apartments in Evanston, but we do everything in our power, even during COVID, to make sure that people didn't get evicted or we didn't renew their leases. Very few people did we have to displace, as a result of what happened, and continue, when people don't pay rent or they're don't abide by the rules of the building or the landlord-tenant ordinance. We still try to do everything in our power to work to get somebody non-renew their lease, so to speak. Yet, if you put this part of it back in there, we'll have to almost go to court before we could get somebody out. And that's the part that it's not only is it very costly to a landlord, but it's extremely discouraging to want to continue to be a part of. I mean, I've said it before with all the other stuff that's been imposed upon. Most of the ROTL laws are completely, I wouldn't say against landlords, but totally tenant friendly. And, not much of it is to help the landlord in situations like this. And, we're one of the biggest providers of affordable housing. Most landlords in Evanston, maybe the new buildings are not, but definitely the older buildings like we take care of. And all you do is discouraging people like us from wanting to invest in Evanston and in some cases pull out. So I would urge you not to pass this.
Thank you. Next up is Kristen White, and she will be followed by Tina Payton.
Good evening, council members and committee members. My name is Kristen White. I'm a 22-year resident of Evanston and a renter in the 2nd Ward. I applaud the good work in the Housing for All plan. There are many bold ambitions that could yield real results to ease the housing crisis at Evanston. One statement in the plan feels woefully inadequate considering the scale of need. The intention to explore a just cause ordinance in Evanston is insufficient when almost half of residents in Evanston rent and almost half of Evanston renters are housing cost burdened. Struggling to afford housing that is also unstable and unpredictable doesn't build a healthy community. Housing affordability is critical to renters, as is housing stability. I myself have experienced the non-renewal of a lease done in bad faith by the landlord that would have been avoided with a just cause ordinance in Evanston. Given the unstable reality of renting and the displacement trends in Evanston, I urge the city to demonstrate a real commitment to creating housing stability for renters and minimizing displacement trends. I ask that you swap out the word explore with develop and make the timeline short-term because we need the solution to reflect the urgency of the problem.
Thank you. Next up is Ms. Payton, followed by Sarah Peterson.
Good evening. I'm Tina Payton, and my family's been providing affordable housing for over 50 years here in Evanston. I want to just quickly object to just cause, and I think that if you're planning on talking about just cause, that it should be notified to the landlords here in Evanston. Mainly, I'm here to object to clause in the vacation rental. There should be what I believe is trying to happen here today is that you're trying to combine vacation rental and short-term rental. Vacation rental is less than 30 days, and short-term rental is over 30 days. I've been renting furnished units for over 10 years, and I have the evidence to prove it. What you're trying to do now in the clause, it says if you have a furnished unit that you have to rent it out for 12 months. I object to that, and you're saying that I cannot rent my unit month to month. You're also making subletting illegal. And what I do, the reason I started furnishing my units was a lot of the students throw their furniture away every time they move. And right now, you can go up and down the alley and see mattresses. And also, students go and see the mattress in the alley and they bring it into the house. And I don't want bed bugs in my unit. So this is why I started furnishing my units, one of the reasons. I also get a lot of international students, and they don't want to buy furniture. They come from across the country. They don't want to buy furniture. And I think you're doing too much trying to combine short-term rental and vacation rental, and I think there should be a distinction. And if you do pass mandatory 12-month lease, you will hear from my lawyer that is totally illegal.
Thank you. Next up is Sarah Peterson, and she will be followed by Hiram Flores.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sarah Peterson. I'm a single-family homeowner in the 6th Ward and the Executive Director of OBA Communities, a housing justice nonprofit in the 2nd Ward. And tonight I'm feeling a lot of gratitude for Evanston and the way that we show up to keep each other safe and fed. And we are also facing other crises in our community, including the housing crisis. And I'm grateful for the way that the city and community members are coming together for this Housing for All plan and the real strides that I see in this plan. As you refine the plan, I do urge you to move beyond exploratory language and focus on specific, measurable, and time-bound goals. This will help to move this plan from aspirations to actions, which are desperately needed now. And we've also seen that we need to intentionally address the segregation that was created by intentional policies in our community, and we need to take an intentional lens when we're addressing these. So we must tailor a neighborhood by neighborhood approach for some of these recommendations. For example, anti-displacement strategies need to be more urgently put in place in the 5th and 8th wards rather than the 6th and 7th. While equitable distribution of affordable housing is more of a need in my ward, in the 6th ward and the 7th ward, where there's a lack of that in my community, in my neighborhood. However, some policies like tenant protections and zoning reform are crucial to be applied universally across the community. Research has shown that patchwork applications of these actually lead to more detrimental effects than if we have a policy that impacts the whole community. So I'm grateful for your time tonight. I'm grateful for you working on this plan, and I'm looking forward to how we can come together as an Evanston and really make our community welcoming for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Hiram Flores, who will be followed by Sue Lilbach.
Hello, my name is Hiram Flores, and I am a student here at Northwestern, and I'm here to speak on the strengthening basically the implementation framework that is already outlined in Housing for All. As a Northwestern student, there's a lot of kids out here that are interested in housing reform, but when they try to figure out what the measurable outcomes are and how to actually implement these things and what they can do. What we realize is that it's kind of difficult to figure out what's actually being asked within the plan itself. So some pointers that are just some general recommendations is splitting the overall goal into separate trackable objectives for preservation and creation. Another one would be setting annual benchmarks towards the 3,000 to 5,000 unit goal. Just to keep things a little bit more organized and see the steady pace that is expected out of this plan. Assigning responsibility to specific city departments and or partner organizations. That way a lot more students can get closer to the city itself and figure out what they can do more in the space, and be linked to other organizations or external organizations that we can use and work with to help Evanston's at risk for displacement. Another one is including estimated budgets or funding sources, staffing plans to ensure accountability. That's very important since, when we're trying to talk to members in the community, a lot of people ask the questions, well, what is this going to cost? What are the general risks of that? And, just kind of having a general idea helps the community generally be on the same page when it comes to these sort of things. So, in conclusion, a strong implementation plan will turn the aspirations into measurable results and allow the public to better track the progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Sue Lilbach.
Good evening. I'm Sue Lulbach with Connections for the Homeless. I wanted to just add on, I think, to what a lot of other people have said. One, we're really excited about the strategic housing plan. I think there's a lot of really good stuff in there. There's room for shaping and forming it. And I'd like to speak specifically to the community input piece. Not what has happened in the past, but how we're going to deal with community input in the future. Hiram mentioned, the need for a committee to be reviewing this plan, have that being part of their charter so that the plan does not ever get put on the shelf by future councils. And we think it's really important that that committee include members of the community that are really representative of the different populations that the community includes. We also feel that as the strategies in the plan are implemented, community input needs to be built into those processes as well. And so with the, as the strategies are fleshed out, hopefully in the next iteration of the plan, we'd like to see something in there about community input and also acknowledgement that it costs money to get community input. It is labor intensive, and so that needs to be part of the budget for implementing these strategies. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have some online written comment that Yuri, if you, our senior housing planner, can summarize for us.
Sure. So earlier today, my colleague Anna sent out written comment that we received before 3 p.m. today. There was one additional comment that was received afterwards. We'll forward that to you after the meeting, but just to summarize, it was from Sharimer Shavanis, and in general, it is in favor and encouraging the committee to review a particular policy brief from George Mason University about housing reform menu of options, and it describes a little bit of a summary and encourages you to review and discuss that and incorporate that into this plan and upcoming components. Again, we'll forward that to you after the meeting.
I was listening. Is that public? That's the end of public comment? Did we get through? Where are we at?
Yes, we haven't typically. I believe the chair ends up asking if anybody else is interested in the room. We haven't done that yet, but everyone who's signed up in advance.
It sounded like you were talking about public comments that were sent to staff. Is that what you were just doing?
There was one public comment sent that did not make it in time to share with the committee prior to this.
No, that's what I thought where we were. I was listening on my phone. Would anybody else like to make a public comment this evening, either online or in person? Okay, seeing none. We'll go to minutes, approving the minutes. If somebody can make a motion to approve the October 21st minutes, please.
I would move approval of the October 21st Housing Community Development Committee minutes.
All right, it's been properly moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, it's been seconded. Any changes? We're good. All right, all those in favor of approving these minutes, say aye.
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 Any nays? Any abstentions? We have approved minutes. Abstain. I'm sorry. One abstention. On to new business, old business. If somebody can move 5A, please.
I will move 5A, referral to amend Title 5, Chapter 9 of the City Code, vacation rentals, for discussion.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Andrew, are you gonna lead us off, or are you, I know you need direction from us, but if we can, if you want to set this up.
Thank you, committee members. Andrew Senroman, Building and Development Services Manager. With regards to the short-term rental ordinance, we provided a draft ordinance for the committee to review for this meeting. This draft ordinance does have some amendments to it. When it comes to the standards for approving short-term rental licenses, there were some adjustments made. The number of short-term rentals Due to comments that we received in the previous meeting, we revised that to say the maximum number of short-term rental licenses allowed within each ward of the city shall be 25, but that's something that we need direction on, whether that number is the right number to this committee. Also, with regards to the standards, we made those standards apply to all short-term rentals. We removed the definition for owner-occupied and made the standards apply to all short-term rentals then.
All right, who wants to start us off? Anybody? Councilmember Hadikatis?
Yeah, I know we had a concern from a community member, Ms. Payton, about the definition of short-term rental. I think if we can speak to that a little bit, because I know I think I really appreciated her feedback on having like a fully furnished apartment for international students, and that like provides a service. Now, in my reading of the ordinance, there wasn't anything saying that you couldn't rent a fully furnished apartment, but there seems to be maybe some ambiguity or misunderstanding around our short-term rental definition, because I think I'm just making an assumption, but Ms. Payton, I'm sure doesn't put these on VRBO, like Airbnb, or I can't remember the other ones, but these are apartments with leases. So having like a short-term, could you speak to the difference between a short-term rental and something that has a shorter, less than 1 year lease? If you can speak to that a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. So the intention with the ordinance, and we can adjust the definition of short-term rental to explore some language that would better clarify it, but the intention is short-term rentals that are listed on those hosting platforms like VRBO and Airbnb. Some of those are rented out for longer than 30 days. That's why we had put for a period of less than 1 year, but we definitely understand that there are longer term rentals that are on month-to-month leases, and so we might need to explore adding some language that could clarify that point.
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful just to, as a clarification, so that folks aren't concerned that their normal business process of having a less than a year, but a long, we'll just call it a long-term lease with like a lease agreement isn't somehow wrapped up into this. I think that'd be really helpful. I know that one of the big questions was that you want feedback from is kind of what number, or should we have like a limit to how many of these short-term licenses we have? I think for me, it would make sense that we would go no higher than the number we currently have. I think there is some room maybe to like even lower that number, but I think we have to look pretty closely at a ward by ward basis to see what number is appropriate for each ward, and then just limit also. I think there's concern from residents that a block kind of gets taken over by these short-term rentals, but limiting the number per city, per ward where appropriate, and also how many per block, I think makes sense. I also very much don't want us to have any, I think if they meet the standards, it should just get approved, and then I think regulation is the most important part. If there are, I really appreciated in the ordinance the feedback about city manager being able to pull a license if there's a problem property. I think that's appropriate. I think also having a yearly review of short-term rentals that have received complaints via our 311 or police complaints, police visits. I think I would much rather be making a determination based on those sorts of complaints rather than giving a stamp of approval beforehand. So that's, I think, my main thoughts on the feedback you guys asked for.
Yep, Salome.
Yeah, I agree with Tina. I wouldn't want anything in there that would interfere with renting a rented apartment. It seems like she's filling a need. So I certainly wouldn't want anything in there that would interfere with her ability to rent for varying amounts of times, without having to go for a year. Then I was just thinking, as far as the number for each ward, what is the difference in the number of housing units in each ward? I mean, some wards, we've got a lot of rises, and we've got other wards with, mainly single family, and should it reflect the number of housing units in the ward?
Yeah, Councilman Rogers.
Thank you. Yeah, I submitted a bunch of things to staff earlier about some of the things, and some of the things that I'm concerned with in this are, I would really like to see us lower the cost of entry for this, so that people can participate in this program if they want to, but increase the fines if they violate the rules and increase those penalties, so that we're really going after people who are not behaving within the rules, but we give everybody the ability to get into the game if they want to. I had reduced the number even more. I know there's been some confusion about how many of these do we actually have. So what is the number of actual units that we actually have currently licensed in the city?
So as we were working on citing those who are not currently licensed, we were coming across the fact that some of the listings were duplicates. Some of them were for one room or another room, and then also the entire unit. And so you'd get 3 listings for what's actually one unit. So we asked staff to really do a deep dive into them and figure out exactly how many units do we have. What we came up with was there are currently 135 units that are actually listed, full units. What we have right now that are currently licensed, we have 78. So 135 units in total, 78 that are currently licensed.
Okay. So when we're talking 25 per ward, we're drastically increasing that number, because the note I put together said 15 per ward, and that's 135. So I don't know that we want to open this all the way up to 25 per ward. I would like to see maybe also, there was a ratio at one point. I think that's fallen out of this, so I don't need to discuss that. Other things that I had put in was for the special uses that we have as part of the zoning ordinance. One of the things that we do is look at the negative cumulative effect of similar types of uses in an area. And I would love to see if we do something like that to prevent sort of getting an Airbnb row, as it were, or something like that. So not necessarily stating that, it becomes sort of a somewhat subjective opinion as to what is the appropriate spacing between these types of units, or this type of usage. So I would be in favor of adding some language like that in. Do we have anything, and I didn't see anything that limited the amount of units people could own?
We did not. There was some concern from staff of possible legal concerns with that.
Okay, if we're going to limit units, I have a big concern if we open it up, because if there are 25 or 15 per ward, and I have the advantage of getting 10 of those licenses, I really kind of own the monopoly on those type of licenses in the area. I will reconfirm with staff, with law, but when I spoke with Deputy Corporation Counsel yesterday, I did not think this was an issue. I'm looking to Ms. Penrose now.
Good evening. Catherine Penrose, Assistant City Attorney. You are correct. The issue was primarily when you're talking about ownership, the entities that you are likely most concerned about would likely have series LLCs set up, in which case they're individually owned, technically speaking. So it wouldn't necessarily, staff's view was it wouldn't necessarily accomplish the goal of limiting it to, smaller landowners or property owners, because an entity or even an individual landowner who has series LLCs set up, and most of those who own multiple properties do for liability purposes, those are individually owned. And so their owners are different when there's a series LLC set up. And
Okay,
that was the concern.
I'd like to talk a little bit more offline
Okay.
about that.
Sure.
Because if we're going to limit numbers, I think we need to make it so that individuals or corporations can't hold all of the licensing opportunities in certain areas of town. Some of the other things that are, a couple of other things I put in was, I would like to put in some language about deceptive representation. I know that there is at least one in my ward that is using an incorrect address. And then when somebody registers, they give them the correct address. And this is all done to evade the scrubbing that we do. I know that there are people who say Chicago, and it's technically Evanston. So I think it's important that if we find somebody who is behaving deceptively, that we revoke licenses right away on that. And I think that kind of covers off on most of the things. The only other thing which wasn't in my memo, I know that some places are now requiring in your listing to list your city license number. And I would be in favor of us adding that in as a requirement as well.
Just to speak to a couple of the items that you had mentioned, I think one had to do with adding language in the standards about cumulative negative effect. We had chosen not to include that because it's a more subjective standard. It's difficult to objectively evaluate that. And so that's why we had added in a certain number by ward or a number by city to give a better idea of that.
It is subjective, and we've used it for years on land use issues. And so I think it's something that is important, because if I have 15 allowed in the 8th ward and they're all on one street, that creates a problem. So I think that is something that we can do. If staff isn't happy with that, then let's look at putting distances, like physical distances in, like they can't be within a quarter mile. That's not subjective. That's a very objective thing. That does cross ward boundaries, though. As you know, I mean, something on the south side of Oakton directly across from something on the north side of Oakton are in 2 different wards, but would combine to what's happening in that neighborhood.
Well, we could consider just using a distance separation and not doing the ward by ward. Would that be something that people would like to consider? Because that's a possibility. The other thing I wanted to point out about the total number of one of the things that we don't have a really good handle on, but we will get a better handle on as we track longer, is how many of these individual properties are rented for longer periods of time, because one of the things that happens is sometimes people are using Airbnb type things short term, where when they're selling a property or something like that and they go away. So we don't know the kind of churn, you know what I mean, that is going to be common. So that's something I think we could try to track and try to provide more information to the committee as we get, and the council as we get that information.
Just to one other thing that you had mentioned, I think other council members had questions about it too, as far as the numbers that we currently have within each ward. I do have some kind of approximate numbers. One of the wards actually has around 30. short-term rentals currently, while another ward only has 5. So they're not evenly distributed where we could say 15 per ward, and that adds up to 135. Currently, the 2nd ward has the most. The 8th ward has around 23, 9th ward around 21. So some of these numbers are already higher than 15 if we were to set it at 15. So it's just something to consider for that information.
Councilmember Isles, I think. Is light on? Yep.
Yeah, one of my questions was how are they distributed? So if our goal is to figure out what a reasonable cap is, and the reason we're exploring this is because we're worried that short-term rentals decreases our housing stock and adds to the scarcity of housing, which is what we're working on and all of the other things that we're doing. I mean, I was going to say, if you're asking for feedback on whether 25 is a good number per ward, I was going to say 10 is a better number, because 25 is, for 9 wards, that's 225 units, and that's more than we have now. If we have 78 licensed, maybe ward isn't the way to do it. Maybe distance between them is a better measure, because you just listed off, of the 78, you said, what, 30 in the 2nd ward alone? That's almost half. And it's going to be difficult to readjust that if we make the rule by ward. So what if we made the limit, 100 for the whole city, and then started talking about what's a reasonable distance between them, and figure out how to readjust that way and give people plenty of notice and a chance to adjust. We're sort of talking about this on the fly a little bit, but I assume that's what you want. You want sort of where we're at, kind of what we're thinking.
Yeah, just an evaluation of what the best way to do this is. Like I said, it's not evenly balanced by ward, and so maybe a different approach would be better.
Yeah, I mean, I do understand Councilmember Rogers talking about negative cumulative effect. I think that would be awful to have 10 of them on one block. It would cause a problem. So maybe ward isn't the way to go about it. But 225 is way too high of a number for the way I feel about it. I'd like significantly less than that. I think we can find a reasonable cap that isn't much higher than what's currently licensed.
Yeah, Member Nuntemper. You want to go next? Yep.
I have a few questions. One is the 135 versus the 225 that the committee is discussing and staff is discussing. That's against about 14,000 units throughout the city, correct?
That is correct, yes. We had given a number of 225. That's how many listings there are. But once we drilled down and figured out how many actual units, it's 135. As far as long-term rentals, we have over 14,455, I think it is.
Okay, so it's a fraction of the total that's out there. And I know that, or what I've read is that we're at 78 because of the moratorium, correct? Is there a way to approximate what the demand could be? Is that the 135, that you were talking about from the listings, Airbnb and Verbal?
So of those 135 that we have found that are operating, whether licensed or not, 78 of those are currently licensed. So
I see.
Yeah.
I'm making a connection now. And is there any way to approximate by ward how many potentially, in order to help with estimating total number by ward? Is that a possibility?
It's difficult to estimate potential. I will tell you that over the last year or so that we've been tracking that we've had this software, that total number of listings has hovered around 220, 225, hasn't gone up much, hasn't gone down much. That's where it stayed.
Okay.
And then as far as issuing the licenses, is it a first come, first serve? So like if at the beginning of the year, sort of like the beach passes, people come, they say we want them, they get them, and then anyone else later on in the year will not be able to, they'll be able to apply but may not be able to get the license. Is that correct?
So we've been processing them as we receive them. Obviously, there's a moratorium.
The moratorium?
Obviously, there's a moratorium right now, but we've been processing them as we receive them. If we were to place a cap on it, then we would have to decide how to administer that cap. But
Okay. But right now, we're nowhere near the cap, so that's not even a thought. Okay. Thank you.
Like many up here, I too have been struggling with the word by word approach. I just think it's really, I think it's just because of the differences in housing across all of the wards, I think it's just hard to put like a number for all and say, this is what it is. So I too came in thinking that it would be better to have just an overall goal for the city of what we would do. And then certainly, as some of the others have shared about, you know, whether it's a distance, I thought the kind of the ratio that was in the previous draft, I thought brought some heft to it as well, so that you could kind of combine, you know, the distance and the ratio to help you get to the right mix for each ward, knowing that you've got more dense wards than others. And obviously, you know, I think, I think having a citywide goal to me makes more sense, and then maybe building in some other things that, you know, would address, you know, not having negative effect. So.
Councilmember Hedekadis.
Yeah, I think aiming for basically having the same amount that we currently have, I think the 135 number makes the most sense. I think as we're digging into ward by ward, I think having the distance requirement, maybe like no more than X amount in an area, because I think if we say like no more than, I mean, we could have multiple layers to it. It could be distance. We could also do something like you can't have more than 2 on one street. I know there's a couple cases where current people they own a home and then they have an Airbnb on the same block. So that density thing might skew the numbers a little bit, but yeah, I think we have to, because a few wards are pretty high over the limit, I think kind of throwing out the ward by ward makes the most sense. But I think we can have it be, I mean, we can also have multiple density factors. So I'd like to see something so like to avoid having a street that's just all Airbnbs, short-term rentals, and then also kind of a more layered with the distance requirement, I think would be helpful.
So as a resident of the second ward, I was just wondering, do you know if most of those units are in the second ward that it goes over towards campus? Or do you not know where they are?
I can pull up a map real quick and get that for you. If there are other comments, I'll work on that for you. Yep.
Councilmember Rogers.
I just have a quick question. So we keep talking about this 135 versus 78. So the numbers that you gave us of 30 in the second ward, 23 in the 8th ward, is that from the 135 or is that from the 78?
That's from the 135.
I was hoping that you would say that, because otherwise that takes up most of them right then and there in the first two. Okay, thank you.
Could you go through ward by ward what the numbers are using that 135?
excuse me, the 135, these are approximate. There's nothing in the software that coincides or that communicates with our GIS. So I did my best with these numbers, but they're close. It would be in Ward 1, 9, in the second ward, 30, in the third ward, 12, in the fourth ward, 14, in the fifth ward, 18, in the sixth ward, 5, in the seventh ward, 10, in the eighth ward, 22, and in the ninth ward, 21.
Thank you. And do we have any, I didn't notice anything, but maybe I missed it, any suspension or revocation language in here about how that will work? Or do we still need to work on that?
Yes, we do have that language in the draft ordinance. We have that in section 5-9-9, that the city manager may revoke or suspend a license for the following reasons: if it's a nuisance premises, if it's deemed to be a vacant building, or if it's condemned or decided that it's a dangerous building.
I mentioned that I think it's important to require that they use a vetted software for a lot of different reasons. I think it'll be easier for us to track who's doing it. I think it'll be easier for them to remit taxes to us. There's a whole host of reasons why I think we should require that they use either a software that we have pre-selected, like various softwares we can review and see which ones that we want people to work with, maybe 5 or 6, or just there's some vetting process where they say, hey, I'm using this software, we check it out, and as long as it meets all of our requirements, then we give them the go-ahead. But I think that's important. From talking to legal, and I know we can't get too deep into this, so we'll have more offline conversations, but it sounds like I think we're headed in a direction that's probably best, because from what I got from talking to legal is that any cap that we do, we're going to have to explain why we're establishing the cap, and it can't be arbitrary. And so it can't be we want this cap because we want the cap. Like, it has to be for a justifiable reason. And so I think even the way we were thinking about it last time, with wards having all the same cap, wouldn't really make sense, because why? And so I learned that because I started thinking about the fifth ward, because I would like to put a cap there, maybe even allow less in that area than we do in other areas, because of the character of the neighborhood, because of the housing crisis that I think is unique to that area, and maybe some other areas in the ward or in the city. So I think we do need to spend some time thinking about how we're going to control the amount of these in the community, and where and why. And that's going to take longer than we have in this meeting, but yeah, that's going to take some time. We have to make sure we get that right.
I do want to point something out, that in some cases, we believe there are people who Airbnb or, have short-term rentals in part so they can then afford their mortgage and things like that. So we've got an interesting balancing act that is really hard to figure out, So that's another factor that we have to try to think about, but I don't know how we can actually prove or track.
I think that's all the questions I had. Did anybody else have any other comments? So it feels like there's still some work here that we need to do in terms of timeline. I guess, what is the expectation of the committee? Like, so we're currently under a moratorium. We said that expires when again? Is that
December, I think, yeah.
And so I guess, how are we feeling in terms of timing? And because there's still some work left,
I think
to get this right.
I think at the last meeting, I think the thought is, if we got some good feedback here, and I think I'll leave this question up to staff, like, we should have enough guidance from this committee and feedback that they can go and work on version 2 of this and have it ready for introduction sometime to city council. And I think that would, because isn't the thought that it would go straight to city council from here? And so, I mean, we could have multiple readings at
Yep.
city council depending on our feedback. I mean, I know it's like, I think this might be a record for the number of referrals. I think everyone like put their name on this because there's a lot of like strong feelings about this. So I think it might take three like hacks at it, but you don't know. I mean, we'll see.
Happens,
Like, but if it goes,
that would go beyond the.
yeah. But I think maybe.
Yes, I'm trying to figure out how do we handle the fact that this is going to expire soon. The moratorium is going to expire soon.
I mean, we can also extend the moratorium again.
Yeah.
If we need more work, but I think it makes sense. I think for me that it goes to city council and we have our colleagues there also weigh in.
For sure. Councilman Rogers.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same. And I mean, as the person who gathered everybody together to get the moratorium in place, the idea was that this caused us to actually work on it. Last time there was a year-long moratorium and it just kind of like, oh, we'll get to that. Oops, we ran out of time sort of thing, I think is how it happened. So I don't think there would be a problem with extending it as long as we're moving forward in good faith, but I also want to make sure that we don't slow it down, drag our feet on it, because we have people who are waiting for answers on this particular issue.
And so is the thought that when this appears at council that we'll also, at that same meeting, have something on the agenda to extend the moratorium if needed? Is that how we want to handle it?
That's what we would have to do, because right now, we're so close, it won't make this to the 10th is the next city council meeting
Right.
Monday. We won't make that, which leaves us really one meeting, which is the 27th, because our meeting on the 8th is past the moratorium. So at
Yeah.
the 27th, we would have to make a motion.
So you're saying we
to-
should have the moratorium on for the 10th then, our next council meeting? Is that what you're saying?
Or the 27th.
Okay.
I don't
just wanna give
think we
staff
can get it in
clear
by the
direction.
10th necessarily, because, I mean, that agenda is out probably already now.
Yeah.
It's close.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think it would take much to get the moratorium on there, extending it?
I think that if we want to just get a moratorium, we should put it on the 27th, on the 24th, I mean.
24th, okay.
Yeah. Which is the next one.
Okay.
Yeah. And we can easily provide that and have that extended.
Yeah, that works.
The soonest I think we could actually try to come back to council would be the December 8th meeting. And that's just, of course, right after it, so that kind of screwed us up on that. And I don't know quite how much else is going to be on that agenda, because it's the last one of the year, so we can maybe reconsider, talk about what's the date to bring it to council, whether it is going to try to be on the December 8th or whether we push it into January. Does that make sense?
So there's no way that we could even do an introduction to council on the 24th and then literally table it, because I would like this to be at council before we extend the moratorium. That's my personal preference. I don't know how anybody else feels, if any of the other council members want to weigh in.
I mean, that would be ideal. I don't know. We have an extremely tight.
I keep blanking out on the date again. So one more time, when does the moratorium end?
December
5th, I think.
So we really have to, in my opinion, I'm more concerned about, like, once it ends, then does that mean somebody can file?
Yes.
And then that's why I think it has to be the 10th. I don't know why we would kick it to the 24th if it ends on the 5th, December 5th?
No. The 24th of November.
Oh, we're
would
talking about
be-
November,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
November
Perfect,
24th
okay.
meeting, so that we're getting
Okay.
in right before
So
the
then
December 5th.
that goes to your question. You're saying you want this to be the ordinance to be on the agenda before the moratorium, is what you're saying?
As we vote on the moratorium, I would prefer the ordinance be at council, in council's hands.
Yeah.
We can have the ordinance ready by the 24th.
You're saying it won't be ready by the 24th? It can be.
We can.
Okay.
I mean, even if it's this with a few tweaks to it, because I'm sure there are 5 other council members who will probably have things they want to tweak and add
Yeah.
in. So as long as it's introduced and tabled, moratorium extended until February 1st or whatever time, so that gives us January to work on it.
Okay. Has Department, have you met with all the council members yet? I'm sure you haven't, but have you? Just to.
Regarding this amendment,
Ordinance, yeah,
I
the
believe that
vacation
it's
rental.
only been the council members on the committee.
Okay, so we probably want to reach out again, because I think it's incredibly important that everyone on council, and I'll even reach out, speak with you and get that briefing that we all received. So yeah, I can help with that as well.
Great.
Okay. All right. Moving on to, we don't need to take any vote on that, it's just for discussion, so somebody can move 5B, please.
I'll move discussion of the Housing for All draft plan.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Lori, you want to kick us off? Thank you.
Good evening, Committee. Uri Pachter, Senior Housing Planner. This is a continuation of our last meeting where staff provided a summary of public feedback, staff recommendations, is looking for the committee to provide direction for the Housing for All draft update. We went into detail on all those items. I brought all the slides so they're available if it's helpful. I have a few summary slides I want to go over just to refresh our memory, but there are about 40 we had last time. We're not going to go through all of them up front, but if they're helpful, again, we can pull them up for discussion purposes. So again, the key things that we're looking for to continue this evening are responses to the staff recommendations, 14 staff recommendations, any HCDC recommendations, and then to discuss the timeline moving forward of staff preparing the update and discussion at the next meeting. This evening we won't go through the reminder of what Housing for All is, but again, it's available on the website. A few things to highlight, and I'm just going to move. One of the things that we focused on last meeting was looking at the responses to our feedback form and weighting the data based on tenure and income to better understand how it was reflective of the Evanston community. And so just want to refresh, we did this for objectives as well as, hey Reka, do you mind just clicking back on the slide? On that one there. Just click on the slide versus the Zoom. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you. And so, as you can see, there's substantial agreement. And then you can see that on the left, there's the unweighted. On the right, there's weighted. Again, we can go into detail. Again, if interested, just providing a high-level review that there's overall strong support, and the weighting generally increased the support as we were reflecting tenure and income in a more reflective way of the community. Additionally, there are 14 staff recommendations. Just to run through them at a high level, we're looking to add more information about the community in a few areas to tee up the plan, talking about growth overall. If the plan currently focuses on growth for senior households, updating some key takeaways, to condense them but not remove any of the information, generally adding more maps and charts for greater readability. In the goals section, more connections between the overall goals and the goals of each initiative and each strategy. In the strategy section, consolidating and adding more detail, doubling down on funding, collaboration, and data tracking as clear strategies that connect to multiple objectives, summarizing these strategies in a way that shows alignment in terms of vision, community feedback, and what income brackets are being served, adding additional case studies that are highlighting the relevance to Evanston, And I can go forward, not backward. All right. And then additionally, in the implementation section, providing more detailed timeframes by initiative and adding lead and supporting departments by initiative, having more specific elements in terms of oversight, reporting, et cetera, and more clearly tying our current programs to the plan objectives. Again, there are more details in the memo and the slides that we shared last time. So as a reminder, in terms of where we are in the process, here I truncated the previous part of the process and just focusing since June. We released the draft in September. We started hearing feedback last month. We're continuing that this month, looking for clear direction so that we can, staff can move forward with that update and provide that well in advance of the meeting, the upcoming meeting that we would discuss it so that there could be plenty of time for review and a vote to move towards City Council. So again, these are the four elements that would be particularly helpful to hear from the committee today. And staff is ready to answer any questions and take down any feedback.
And can you go back to the staff recommendations again?
Sure. And I can go to the longer ones as well. They're just afterwards if you'd like.
Yeah, if you could pull a few staff recommendations out, the longer form ones, and just go through a few just so we can get a...
Apologies for the speed
y'all good.
move here. So these are the same slides from the last meeting.
Okay, these are the longer
These are the
form
full
ones.
ones. So some of them are, yeah, so for example, we also included some examples where student housing is one of the concepts. And so there wouldn't be this complicated chart, but we would speak to the fact that there's very different housing needs for different student populations and address that in a more clear way so that the community is sort of on the same page in terms of various student housing needs and how to address them. And I can go through these as well, but they're the same as the ones I just discussed, just with a little bit more detail, with a little bit more graphics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions or want Uri to go over anything in particular? I guess my main thought, and I've shared this with staff, is, did you have a light on? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. No, you should go first. Members, let me go.
Well, a big concern is just cause. I mean, I just, as the gentleman said, and I know Tina too, we just can't afford to risk losing the naturally occurring affordable housing that we have. I think a lot of people are aware, and on the council, that I think it was the Wirtz family that sold a number of buildings in Evanston last year, I think it was, or the year before, and displaced a lot of people because they were going to rehab them and up the rents, and a lot of people got displaced. So we just can't afford a risk, and I just want to make that a low priority. I mean, I know I'm a landlord, I'm a retired realtor. There's always a balance of the needs of the landlord and tenants. I guess I don't know, what is the occurrence of evictions for, other than paying rent or non-renewal of lease? I guess you probably don't know that unless, people are complaining. But I just think we can't take the risk of losing the affordable housing we already have in Evanston from people who have supplied it for many, many, many years.
Thank you. I guess my first question is just trying to understand when you think about how you're going to help us prioritize the strategies or initiatives, what's your thought process around that?
Sure. So I'm happy to give the thought process, and then also want to hear direction there as well so that we can be as responsive as possible. So a couple things in terms of the recommendations that speak to that. These are the little bit longer versions. So one is by consolidating the strategies and adding another layer of detail, basically changing, I think I have some examples here. Yeah, so here's here's a good example, is this next one. Right now, the different strategies are at various levels. Some are very specific policies and some are more overarching ones. By consolidating, I think, and having individual initiatives, it'll become clearer that some initiatives support multiple objectives. And while that is more qualitative than quantitative, I think that will speak to some low-hanging fruit or basically higher ROI opportunities. That's one component. Two, another piece we're looking at is recommendation number 9, is providing, I think this one's pretty key, is providing a chart where we're looking at alignment along what we're trying to achieve, which income brackets are being served, community feedback, et cetera. We're looking to incorporate funding as much as possible as well. I think I mentioned last time that we've looked at a scan of other plans that incorporate funding, and there aren't great examples of that, and we're trying to do that, and we're not going to change our North Star, but there aren't obvious models where we can rinse and repeat and apply to Evanston, and so we are looking to figure out how best to do that. But other ways include sort of generally encapsulating cost, even if it's sort of like a Zagat style, like $1 sign to $4 signs. At least that shows a general idea of this is a cheaper initiative versus a larger one. Drilling down a little bit further in terms of what the impacts are for housing units or households. So then there is a little bit more of an ROI of level of impact and cost. Also looking at what funding sources are available right now versus what ones we'd have to go out and create or leverage or find from partnerships. So those are sort of a multi-pronged approach where we're looking to tee up a better set of sort of options that are, I think right now they're more in the menu, and hopefully the next level is more a clear sort of analysis or comparison, so that there's some differentiation and ability, even if it's based on values or based somewhat subjectively, can pull out, this is more important. I know it's more important for this reason.
Member King.
Yeah. Couple of, I'm going to get back on, I think I was talking about this last time about priorities, and I think, you know, as I look at the plan, it's great, it's very ambitious. You know, there's a lot of stuff in here, there's a lot of things that I feel like could happen. And so I think kind of going through and thinking about what kind of fundamental things we need to do to kind of get us on a trajectory to achieve some of this plan, I think would be good. So kind of looking at, you know, the preserve, create, and protect sections, and really kind of saying, of these 10 proposed strategies, you know, what are the most important that we think we need to do to move forward to this. So, you know, and just for example, you know, I think in here we talk about like ADUs, and you know, I feel like that program's been around a long time, and I don't know how successful that's been in creating more affordable housing in Evanston. And so, is that as high a priority as creating a better zoning code, or you know, creating incentives for more density in our housing stock? So I just feel like some of that stuff I think would be good, because I think this document should really be directional. You know, it should really help the Land Use Commission. It should really help the City Council in making the important calls that they're going to have to make on, you know, housing in the next decade, and doing that with a framework of where the priorities are in this plan.
Thank you. Just to clarify, to maximize your input for direction,
Yeah.
would you prefer then for the next update, imagining we're not consolidating, just to compare apples to apples.
Yeah.
So 10 strategies under one objective, and let's say 2, 3 are called out as particularly effective, appropriate for Evanston at this point in time, and can be transformational, and the others are secondary, additive, something like that.
Yeah, maybe. Like I feel like you're going down the right path.
Okay.
You know, like maybe not secondary, but they're, they, there are. I think we're kind of at this place right now where we've got a lot going on in terms of comprehensive plan and zoning code and obviously the strategic housing plan, and I think there's been a lot of discussion at the council around having the comprehensive plan and this plan in sync. And so I think kind of where the priorities of the comprehensive plan and where this plan overlay, I think would be really important, because again, I think this plan should be something that when the council and when the commission or the land use commission are looking at, proposed projects that they do that. And I won't monopolize the time. The other thing that I just had a comment on is, I was really pleased to see that there was like a overall goal in the plan for the number of units we want to see in Evanston. I think it topped out at like 5,000. And we talk, I'm wholeheartedly agree that, sustaining the existing naturally occurring housing, affordable housing in Evanston is a huge priority. And I think we have to do everything we can to maintain what we have. But in the grand scheme of things, to get to 5,000 means we're going to have to create more housing. And I think we should probably be more explicit in this plan about the amount of housing that we believe we need to create to hit that goal. Because, right now it's kind of nebulous that we're going to protect, we're going to preserve and create. And I think if we're more explicit, I think that will help us then say, okay, if we know we have to meet that goal, what do we want to be doing on an annual basis to create that housing? And how does that then reflect back on inclusionary housing units? And so I just think having some of those like more tangible things in here, I think again is just going to help provide direction to the council and to the commission when they're looking at this housing and thinking about it moving forward. So.
Thank you.
Councilman Rogers.
Yeah, the one thing that I want us to avoid though is reaching something where we're like checking off boxes of we've got 1,000 units or we've got 5,000 units, because it's more important than the number of units that we create that we get the right type of units in if we're truly going to address affordability issues in Evanston. We can get lots of units. I think Director Flax mentioned in the pipeline right now, we have somewhere around 1,300 units that are being proposed. Well, that puts us 1/4 roughly of the way to the numbers that we're looking at in this plan. But are those 1,300 units the type of units that are providing true affordable housing? And she's shaking her head no, since we're, and I was going to say, I don't think it is. But so I think it's important for us to take that next step down and say, we're getting units, but are we getting the right type of units? Because it can't just be adding 5,000 units that are for people who are making $150,000 a year in order to afford them and not be cost burdened.
Maybe we can do, for example, virtually all of those projects have some inclusionary units in those. Inclusionary units are generally at 60% AMI. So we could maybe chart things against that income bracket and say, okay, we're getting this much through IHO. We have, I'm using another couple examples that are in the pipeline. We have the HODC project on Church Street and the Pyrrell project on South Boulevard. Between those two, that is going to be 93 that are all under 60% or 60% or below because they're tax credit projects, but also have project-based support. So chart out how many of those are 30%, how many are 50, and maybe that would be helpful so that people can understand what is in the pipeline, and also compare that against, as Uri was talking about, looking at the need at the different income levels so that we can put it up against that. Does that make sense? Is that what would be helpful?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's kind of what I'm
Yeah, I just want to make sure that,
that it not just be we've
Total
reached
numbers.
our goal and hurrah, party hats and everything like that, but we haven't done anything to truly address affordability.
Right.
So if we're going to do it, let's make sure that we're doing it across the board. I mean, the comp plan, we've talked about increasing housing at all income levels. And so making sure that when we're doing this, we're doing that as part of this process as well.
Sure, because as I say, the IHO gets them at one level, but we have both lower and higher levels that we need to look at as well.
I think there's two parts of affordability, and we conflate the two from time to time, where there's the more deeply affordable housing that's needed, that to get those units they'll probably be subsidized units, and that's for a particular household. But then there's this other question of how do we just generally make Evanston more affordable? And to me, I always think about expanding the tax base. And when I explain this to people, they get it. It's an easy concept. It's like if we expand the tax base, there's more people contributing to paying taxes in Evanston, the less we all have to pay individually. The issue is that we've never really analyzed and understood how much we need to grow to achieve, let's say, a reduction of $500 to $1,000 in the average, property tax. We haven't done that. I don't know if we can do that type of analysis through the strategic housing plan. We've also recently added an amendment to the implementation chapter where we're calling for some research through the comprehensive plan. So in my mind, I'm thinking it either would need to be done through this process or through the zoning consultant process. But I do think it's important that we understand why we're trying to grow. Because I think that's the reason why there's always arguments about it, is because there's nothing tangible. We're just we think we know just general growth is good. But if I can go to somebody and be like, look, if we grow by this amount in this period of time in this way, it has the potential to reduce the average property tax that someone is paying by X amount. Everybody can understand that and get behind it. We're not there yet, and I think we need to get there. The other one is much easier to explain. It's we have the IHO ordinance, right? It's 60% AMI. We know what that looks like. So that's just my first thought. The second thought is, I heard somebody earlier, Member King, say fundamentals. I think first and foremost, we need to understand phase one, right out the gate, when we start implementing initiatives, who are we trying to support first? And to me, the simple way I think about it is, who are the people in the next 1 to 3 years who are going to have to leave Evanston, who are going to be displaced from Evanston because they can't afford it? That to me is the first group. And then from there, that opens up, okay, well, what does that mean then? Obviously you think about income, maybe it's household size. I always say anecdotally, if we know income is an issue, then, household size is probably a factor too. It's the lower your income, the larger your household size, the less available affordable units are, so maybe it becomes one of the first priorities is people of a certain income, but also households of a certain size. Maybe that's in phase one. I'm not saying that's the only group. There could be several groups within phase one, but I'm just focusing on one for a moment. And then if you look at the map, and we see this all the time, but we need to start reacting to it. I'm looking at A092 census tract, which is mostly the 5th Ward. And, in terms of housing cost burden at 52%, the areas, the census tracts that are most housing cost burden are more deep red and the other ones less so. if you look at the map, if we could pull that up for everybody to see, A092, as we all know, the deepest reds you can get, like burgundy, right? And we got to do something about that. So then the question is, all right, well, you know, can we, for that first phase, and again, I'm not saying it's the only group that we prioritize, but it's one group, can we prioritize lower income, larger households, A092 census tract, right? Because again, we don't have unlimited amount of funds. We have an affordable housing fund. We're getting funds from demo tax, from, you know, the Northwestern Good Neighbor Agreement. Soon we'll get it from ticket sales. We're getting it from, you know, the opt-out penalty for IHO program, but we'll have less of that, which is a good thing, obviously. So we don't have, we have the pro-housing grant, which, where are we on that, actually? I think that actually is important to touch on really quick. So,
Well-
and then can you remind me, what is the dollar amount? We received a grant. Director Flax will explain that.
Yeah, it's a $7 million grant.
You said 7 million?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's $7 million, and we have very specific things that we said we would do to, and I don't have the numbers in my head, but,
Yeah, no, that's
you know, there is part of the preserving existing affordable housing and preventing displacement is through rehab programs and things like that that enable people to stay in their homes. And, you know, we're also looking at an ADU strategy with two twists to it. One is to have people, you know, in not income-based to get help with developing an ADU, not necessarily financial, it might be technical assistance, we don't know, but to develop an ADU, if we were to give them any financial help, it would be if they were going to rent it to people at certain income levels, because that's trying to get income, you know, lower income units in areas where there aren't a whole lot.
Yeah.
It can also help people who afford to stay in their homes or move into a living situation more appropriate for them. If it's a lower moderate income person household, and say it's a senior who moves into a ADU that is one level and rents out the main house, that sort of thing. So there are kind of two strategies there.
Do we think we're gonna get that money? Because that was a federal program.
Yeah,
right?
it's a federal one. We've got a signed grant. We're working on it, but right now there's nobody at HUD that we can work with. So we're working on our action plan, which is and saying what the leveraging is and things like
And
that.
we'll go through this in greater
Hopefully
detail
we'll
later,
shake
but
that
It's really
loose.
the dollar amounts I
Yeah.
wanted everybody to understand. So we got 7 million there. Do you know how much we have in the Affordable Housing Fund, roughly speaking, right now?
We have approximately 4 million, I think, but part of that is already committed to things like, some of it's committed to the HODC project and, you know, so.
Got 7 million maybe from the grant. We got 4 million, but some of it is encumbered. We got $1 million coming in a year for Northwestern. Eventually, we get another $1 million a year for 15 years. Once the stadium is built and concerts and all that begins. My point is not a lot of money. And
Right.
so the question is, like, how are we going to, the point of this, at least for me, I've been holding back on trying to advance a whole bunch of different housing initiatives. And I've paused because I think the understanding was this process, the strategic housing planning process, is supposed to inform how we use those funds. But because it's a limited amount of funds, we need to know, like, all right, right out the gate, like, who do we want to prioritize the most? And so I gave you one idea. Again, you know, is it low income? Is it larger households? Is it A092 census tract? Because we know it's the most housing cost burden area. Is it people with school-aged children? We have a new school in that census tract. One of the biggest complaints that you hear is people believe that, oh, we get a new school now that people are being gentrified from the area. So do we want to make sure that people who live there now with school-aged children who could attend the Fifth Ward school can live there, right, affordably, and can stay there? That's one group. Maybe it's another group that we want to prioritize is seniors that have too much house that they can't afford, right? So my point is, like, once we figure out who is most likely to be displaced from Evanston in the next 1 to 3 years, we know, then we can say, if we all agree, okay, that's the group we want to prioritize for the funding that we do have, knowing we can't help everyone all at the same time, then we can start identifying out of all the strategies or initiatives, which ones do we believe can keep people where they are in their homes most effectively. So that's and then there's a hope, and then we, after we identify an initiative, then we have to understand, is it feasible? You know, there's a whole bunch of other questions that come out of that. But so that's what I would like to see, especially early on, because this can take a while. And some of this, I think we can get going if this group and council can come to an agreement on like who, again, is most likely to be displaced. While other things, missing middle, maybe people who are more likely going to be able to stay a while and kind of weather, you know, the conditions and until we figure everything else out. So that's something that's really important to me.
Another really important thing we've already talked about and is also part of the pro-housing grant is looking at affordable housing that is going to, its affordability periods are burning off. And we've got one of those taken care of, which is the Oak Tree Village, because the purchaser is extending the HAP contract with HUD, and we are discussing some help with some upgrades to the units. So that would be a preserving existing affordable housing. And we're also looking at acquiring the scattered site affordable units from the NSP2 program, which are falling out of affordability over the next probably 5 years for the most part. And those are, in some cases, particularly valuable, I think, because they're in small buildings, they're in 2 flats and things like that, and they are often family-size units, 3 bedrooms and things like that. So those are things that are part of the pro-housing grant. So, and I think they very much align with what we're already talking about. So.
And Member King, you'll go next, but I guess what I think would be helpful to staff is can we all support using the data? Again, I gave an idea of what I'm seeing from the data, but are we all in support of allowing staff to use the data to start to prioritize, members of our community that are most likely to be displaced in the next few years and trying to identify which initiatives can help them stay here? Is that something that everybody can get around? And Member King, you have the floor next, but then if you want to, Councilmember Rogers, speak to that or anything else next, I'll get to you. Yep.
I was going to just amplify what you were saying, because I think this prioritization, piece is, as I've just looked at it again, I think it's just, that's kind of the missing piece. Again, I think I said it last time, it's kind of like a menu of things. And I think the other thing that I struggle with the document right now, again, I think it's very ambitious, but the language of explore, I think when we go through the prioritization, I think that will help us move from words like explore to be more concrete in what our goal is. Whether we reach that goal or not 10 years from now, we should be explicitly saying, this is what we want to do, and if we're going to prioritize, I was looking at the protect section, it's, everybody on this, everybody here knows, renters carry almost all of the cost burden in this town. And so, in the short term, as you were talking about, like, what are the strategies we should use to help the renters who are cost burdened right now? So rather than explore increasing rental assistance, let's increase rental assistance and let's figure out the funding to do that. So I think it's just kind of moving from we could do this, we could do that, to very, kind of specifically, these are the things that we feel are most important, and putting metrics behind those or concrete things that we want to investigate, knowing that funding for those is, obviously the elephant in the room. I'm not suggesting that's an easy solution. The only other thing I was just going to come back to, and this is more again about, I think, just kind of creating a through line of consistency, of kind of all of the efforts around housing happening in Evanston right now, of which there are a lot. And I do think, I know there was some comments about this that we received. I know there was some public comment about this last time. I do think having, where we're talking about creating housing, I do think, since we say by right in the comprehensive plan, that we should probably say that in the strategic housing plan. I know that was a very contentious thing in the council debate. I know that, ultimately, but I do think that is something that, again, we should not, since it is a part of the comprehensive plan and this is a derivative of that and creating direction on strategies, I think we should be calling that out.
Councilmember Rogers, did you want to?
Yeah, just I support the 1 to 3 year displacement idea that you're talking about. The thing I would also like to see attached to that is I like your idea of the Zagat dollar amount sort of thing, so we know if this is a very costly thing or an easier cost burden for us, and also if there's any way to sort of identify, and I know it's a crapshoot for you guys to figure this out in today's environment, but like how easy is it to find funding for this sort of a thing? Is this a policy that there are grants out there for, or is this a policy that we're just going to have to start cold calling, as it were, to find out if there even is funding for this? Because I think that will help us, because while it's great to have the idea of these are the priorities for 1 to 3 year displacement, if they're going to cost us $35 million to achieve these things, and I'm just throwing a number out there, that's not feasibly realistic for us at this point with our budgets and with what the federal government is able to fund and things like this, especially when we're talking this period of time. Hopefully in 5 or 6 years, we will have corrected some of the issues that we're having with federal government funding. But I think we need to be very realistic about that as well. And so rather than throwing our whole pot of money behind one priority, I would rather see us go, hey, here's 2 or 3 things that will be much more meaningful and are at a dollar price where it's the same cost roughly as that one big idea.
I do want to also point out another thing I think we have to look about is the longevity of the affordability. I mean, rent assistance, for example, is very effective as short-term keeping somebody in housing. It's really expensive if you're trying to use it to really make long-term affordable housing. So that's an example, I think, of what you're talking about, Councilmember Rogers. It
is.
We have to have
Where do we get the bang
balance
for our buck?
focusing on units that are affordable that people can be in for long periods of times versus short-term things. And I think that's
and
a
that's
very
why
good
I
point.
would like us to look into. I saw Ms. Payton roll her eyes when we talked about giving money to someone. I would love to look at trying to find ways that we can fund our naturally occurring affordable housing, because I think that is a long-term benefit to the community by people being able to, again, not that short-term rental assistance where we help people maybe for a couple months, but where we're helping provide housing that is long-term affordable housing that is not going to see drastic increases over time. And so I would like that to also be part of that priority, because I think that is something that really takes care of some of that displacement issue. If we're putting a heavy cost burden on small landlords where they have to keep up to date on things, they need new boilers, they need new or heat pumps now, or they need to repair replace windows, the age of their building, things like this. I think that's a smart investment in keeping those units affordable, which helps ease that displacement of people.
Yeah, I would just say that I think the naturally occurring affordable housing, we is my understanding is that's when the unit is naturally priced at an affordable amount without any subsidy. And there's not a lot of that, right? Even some of the people who I think this body may think are providing naturally occurring affordable housing are more accurately renting to people who are in the Housing Choice Voucher Program, which is a good thing. First of all, everybody is supposed to rent to people in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. You're not supposed to discriminate against source of income, but we know it happens. They may not they're not going to say that's why it's happening. They may use credit or something else. So it is a good thing that we do have housing providers in our community who are open and eager to rent to people who are in the Housing Choice Voucher program. But there's more of that, I think, than people who are actually providing naturally occurring affordable rents. And so when I think about displacement, certainly in the Fifth Ward, I'm thinking about income restricted units. So that's Oak Tree Village. Sarah mentioned that a moment ago. That's something we need to support. By contract, right, those units have to be affordable at a certain amount. So Oak Tree Village is a good example of that, and there are others. But I just wanted to clarify that because of rising insurance costs and property taxes, and Ms. Payton will probably rattle off a whole nother number of costs that are rising for her and other housing providers. Like it's really tough for a landlord to have affordable rents right now unless there's some subsidy coming in, unfortunately. I think the inclusionary housing program, because and obviously, there's an incentive program, abatement program connected to that, but I think that's a way where we can get affordable housing. We don't necessarily need to come up with like cash out of our budget, like cash coming out of our affordable housing fund to pay for it, but we know we're only going to get 60% AMI. I don't think many people are going to opt. I think we may have one on Emerson, but I'm not sure if too many developers are going to opt to. There's an option where they can provide less affordable units as long as they're more deeply affordable, if I'm getting that right, Sarah. I don't know right now if a lot of people are going to opt for that, but that's something we could take a look at if we say, okay, it's less costly, at least on the front end, to try to get more affordable housing through our inclusionary housing program. But because most people seem interested in, providing the 60% affordable, we need to do something to either amend or encourage them to do 40% or 50% as an example.
Right now, because much of what is driving the 20% and even the 15% affordable units is the state reduction in assessed valuation. So that's really difficult right at the moment. We offer that. That's something that we really built into our IHO, that if you, instead of 60%, if you are at 50 or 40%, you have fewer units. And it's still the same value. In other words, and we've tried to have that all along. But right now, the state incentives are driving that 60%.
Saying if we're trying to figure out how to lower costs, that's probably one of the first places that we would want to look. But again, we would arrive at that point once we decide 1 to 3 years, right? We want to try to keep people here. And I had some other thought, but I lost it. Member Zaloma, you are next.
Could you mind if I jump in for 1 second on the inclusionary housing? One other component that allows for 40% and 50% or lower units, even if the developer is opting to stay at 60%, is the new ordinance has a weighted average.
Okay.
And so if they stick at 60% AMI, overly simplistic scenario can provide 2 units at 60%, but it could also do 2 units at 50 and 70, 40 and 80. They can't go higher than 80. But that's an option. And so there are, even if developers are trying to maximize the number of units to comply, like Sarah was saying, there's still an opportunity for weighted average, which can provide some units at lower costs. Just wanted to add that.
No, that's important. And that's the type of, that strategy to me, like thinking about it in that sense. And you're saying that would still work with the abatement program, the state abatement program?
Correct. The requirement from the state is that a municipality has to, in their ordinance, allow a weighted average. And so in our recent ordinance, we intentionally put that in so that it could qualify. We wouldn't be boxing developers out.
Okay.
It's complicated, and some of the developers kind of get like, how can I manage that?
But we might want to work with them again to figure out, like, all right, what is making you uncomfortable, if anything, in doing the weighted average, so we can get more deeply affordable units. And again, at least it's not cash out of our budget, to create more units. Member Zalomi.
I just want to say, as far as helping people stay in their home, or landlords, maintenance is cheaper than building new, in the long runs. I know that city has, is looking into what to do with their excess property. So if you sell the Civic Center or whatever, and I know we need a new police and fire station though too, if some of those buildings get sold, is it already preordained where that money would go, or could it go to affordable housing? And then with schools closing, what's going to happen with them?
I can just say that it's I don't believe anything's preordained, but through one program that we're using, putting assets to work, is looking at those properties and including the Noise Art Center, and affordable housing is one of the components that is a priority for that group in general. It doesn't mean that it would be at any one location. There's a lot more work to be done, but to my understanding, that's one of the prioritization areas, whether there's a co-development opportunity or it's sold, and then it can move on in that fashion. Sarah, if you had anything else. Okay.
Councilmember Rogers.
I just wanted to respond to the idea that natural occurring housing also has that subsidized housing. That's where you're going to get it. It's not going to go into high rises downtown that are luxury high rises. So by protecting that naturally occurring affordable housing, we are also protecting that 30% AMI as an option, because I know Ms. Payton has people who are taking that option. The buildings next to me are taking that option. But they also do have units that are more market rate, although they're still slightly below. So I think that, when we talk about the naturally occurring affordable housing, having these subsidized units in them, that's because that's where it's going to go. You aren't going to see it in a high-rise downtown. You aren't going to have people who are spending $5,000 a month and the developer is going to take in people who are on Section 8 housing. It's just not going to happen.
I just want to point out they're required to by law. However,
there's ways around it.
Well, the tricky part is just that the maximum amount that they're going to be reimbursed is well below $5,000, and then the individual needs to pay the difference. So it's actually the individual is going to have a very hard time paying for it.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I just wanted to make sure that there, while there is not a lot, there are still naturally occurring affordable housing without subsidy that don't require somebody to have a housing choice voucher. And so I just want to make sure if we're talking about naturally occurring affordable housing, that's what it is. And if that's what we're talking about, I do agree we need to try to help people maintain that as best we can, as well as support people that have a history of supporting people with housing choice vouchers. That's important. I mean, a lot of people in our community, in the Fifth Ward but for the housing choice voucher program would not be in Evanston. And so it's an incredibly important program, and any landlord that is eager to rent to people in that program have my blessings. I appreciate all the work that they're doing. But naturally occurring affordable housing is not that, but we do need to preserve it as best we can. Does anybody else have anything else they want to weigh in? I think Councilman Rogers gave the 1 to 3 kind of years a nod with a caveat. Is everybody else comfortable with that or want to add anything to it?
And I got to turn my microphone on. I'm still learning all the ropes here. I guess, yes, I think that's a great idea. I think like your phase 1 to 3 year, but I also do not want to lose the long-term horizon because, it's not, I don't think we'll be back here 3 years from now doing another strategic housing plan. And so I think we should look at phase 1 and then have a comprehensive phase 1 as a part of a comprehensive document that we can then, come back to again and say, okay, phase 2 now as we, what are our priorities moving forward? Because I do think in order to achieve the goals that we want here, we're not going to do that in 3 years. Like we're going to, we can do what we can, the low-hanging fruit stuff, but the larger like infrastructure stuff, like the longer term housing that we need, like that's going to take a lot of time. And so I think kind of looking at a phase one objectives, but I think we have to have long-term goals that are also measurable that we're putting into the plan too. I just think I just wanted to add that caveat to it.
Member Zalomi.
I just wonder if on this chart that we have, if you could resort it by your short-term, intermediate, and long-term. So instead of by the category, and then we can, I think it'd be easier for me to say, oh, I'd rather to see that moved up or moved down, whether that would be.
Just to be clear, in the draft, there's the different strategies, and then there's the implementation section. That's the area that you're focused on in terms of organizing it in terms of like phase one earlier and then later. Yeah. Okay.
It just be, you know, I mean, I keep flipping back and forth. I'd rather see all the short-term items together and then the intermediate, long-term, and then I think it'd be easier. If I'd want to move things up one way or move things down.
Thank you.
Instead of doing it by the, you know, the needs and so forth.
And I'll just say, I totally agree. We should continue working on the plan until it's finished. I think in my mind, I don't think staff is going to have the time capacity to put a lot of detail into everything that's going to go into the plan. And so while we could certainly phase everything out, and then let's say if it's 10 phases, like, you know, we'll know when. I think it's reasonable to expect we can figure out like, okay, when do we want to try to get phases 6 through 10 completed? But I think in order to figure out phase one, like we're going to need to dedicate a lot of time into figuring out funding and just the way we're going to implement it. And so that's what I mean is like just trying to quickly figure out what the phases are, but then whatever phase one is, honestly, I mean, we need to start it yesterday, you know, years ago. You know what I mean? So that's my concern is we got to figure out a way to implement while also continuing the planning process. And it's really important to me that we figure out how to strike that balance. Councilmember Rogers.
Yeah, I also think it's important for us to remember that this is a living document. And so we can come up with a plan today, but 2 years from now, we might say, something's changed drastically. We need to address a different issue and something needs to get bumped down and something needs to be brought up. So I think it's important that we start off with our key thing and kind of sketch out everything else, but realize that those things have the ability to move around depending upon shifting needs. You know, like I said, if all of a sudden we get a lot of funding again for something, that may move things up. If we never have another Democratic president, that may move things down. You know, so it's important that we just all acknowledge that this is not like set in stone the moment that we write it, and it will be a living document that will be reviewed by council, by this body over the next 10 years.
So before we adjourn, just timing. So I know Director Flax, we talked about potentially like working on this, bringing it back. When did we say again? Because we're going to need a lot more time on this than we do with the vacation rental program. So
right, and one of the challenges we have is your next 2 meetings, you have very full agendas. So you've got the 2026 action plan for our HUD grants coming up, and also that includes projects that are going to be funded with the 2025, you know, all that stuff. So I think that what we need to do is come back in January with the next. We need to look at those things you were just talking about. How can we look at our things we need to do, and which ones take priority time-wise, and explain why, and quantify those, all those things we've just been talking about, to try to get some framework around this. And you're right, we aren't going to try to, you know, describe strategies in detail for all of the things, but I think that it is important. I'll give you an example. We're not going to come back with missing middle housing solutions immediately, because frankly, that's going to be partly a zoning thing, especially because we're talking about in the comprehensive plan integrating more affordable housing throughout our neighborhoods. So economically integrating our neighborhoods is going to be a longer term goal than getting, immediate addressing I'm just using one example, the properties that are falling out of affordability. How can we save those? That type of thing. That's just one example. But I think that.
Is everybody good with that?
I think
timing?
we've gotten pretty good direction from you.
Councilmember Isles.
So are you saying we're not going to see the next version of this with the recommendations until January? Did I hear you right?
Well, I don't know that we can.
Because that's not what the slide said. I'm
Well,
not,
originally, we had a very aggressive
It
goal
did
of
seem like an
coming to
aggressive
council
timeline.
in December, and we can't make that one.
Okay, that's what
Yeah.
the slide said. Okay, so
No,
January.
the slide-
I'm just setting expectations.
Yeah.
Councilmember Rogers.
Could I just maybe make a suggestion that if we get that stuff, it be shared with us before January and allow us to sort of have an initial response to it so that when we come back in January, it's not like we're seeing it for the first time, brand new, and we've actually had time to sort of look at it, maybe say, hey, I'd like a little more detail on why this is this priority or that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I think we need to kind of, if we can regroup and get back to you with some kind of a little more specifics on timing, because quite frankly, the committee has a lot going on, and there's just a lot going on altogether.
But we'll make sure I think it's important to get this information out as early as we can, and so we'll get back to you on that.
Yep, that's fine.
And I think.
I mean, if it's not possible, it's not possible.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
a
yeah.
suggestion.
I was just going to say one thing we've definitely talked about this whole time is that this version would not come out on a typical Friday before a Tuesday meeting.
Right.
It would be, we were talking at least a week in advance, and we can definitely try to make it as far in advance as possible. But if we can't do that, then we definitely don't want to have a meeting because then it's not effective.
Yeah. Okay.
One other point of order.
Yeah, please.
Thank you for providing guidance on the timeline. I just want to be very clear, since we're going to be putting a lot of work into this and want to be as aligned with direction as possible. Staff, there were 14 staff recommendations. Various folks have touched on it, including last time. We've taken detailed notes on that. Just want to be clear. I'll just bring them up one more time. Is there anything, seeing as that there have been little that people have raised that were directly against the direction there, in addition to the other components that people have mentioned? There were some discussions I know about. Let me just go to one, for example. On this slide, I took, there were a bunch of suggestions on not going that far in terms of consolidating and highlighting a couple of those things. Those notes were taken last time. But does anything else come up from these 14 that feel like that is not the right direction, so that staff understands we are going to move forward in addition to all the great feedback we've heard tonight with these 14 or something different? Now is definitely the time to let us know, and they're in the memo. I can review them on the slides again. So number one is adding more information on those areas. I'll just give an opportunity for someone to raise their hand and say there's an issue or flip their light on, I guess. Number two would be not just discussing household growth over the next 10 years with seniors, but discussing it with the larger population. Updating key takeaways. We were planning on consolidating the first three, but that's already modified based on previous feedback, was that making sure that the decline of the Black population was not minimized through this. And then removing student needs as a key takeaway, but moving it to that previous section and focusing more on missing middle housing. We will also incorporate everything, again, that we've heard tonight, adding maps, adding charts, better connecting plans goals overall to the goals of each objective and strategy as well. This consolidation, which will incorporate prioritization and everything else that has been mentioned. These are just a couple examples. So I'm going to pass them. Adding funding, collaboration, and data tracking. We've heard a lot about funding this evening, and also like a living document and reporting and moving forward. That can be clearly incorporated there. Number 9 is focused on teeing up that prioritization and evaluation. Various comments touched on that. Additional case studies. In the implementation section, more detailed time frame and having leads and supporting departments. Potentially partners was mentioned as well. Being specific about which committee, this committee, how frequently we're reporting, and also connecting the current plan, the programs to the plan objectives. Those are just sort of in the appendix. Obviously, changes could be made in January as well.
Feels like all of this complements everything else we've said. I don't think, if anything, is particularly, I think all of this sounds good. Can you go back to 10? I think it was 10.
Sure. That 10 is adding additional case studies. So actually, I forgot to mention earlier, but Reka is a new staff member, our housing coordinator. Anything that you liked about the weighting data was due to Reka. Any problems was due to me. And has been providing a lot of extra support on this project. And one of them is in case studies as well.
Oh, excellent.
And so there's a lot of, we think there's a lot of opportunity to show examples, particularly around how other projects are relevant to Evanston and how they could be adapted here. Is it a big risk because no one else is doing it? Has it been done many places that are similar to Evanston, and we can adapt the model?
Yeah, I guess for me, go ahead.
On the implementation, to the extent that you're able to, I just think that measurement question just keeps coming up. How do we measure success of all of this effort, and what does that look like to us? So I think adding some of that to it would be good.
Thank you.
For number, for success objective. If you can go back on the other one. Yeah, that one. Yeah. Add a table summarizing the strategy. And I guess I want to make sure. I think what we've talked about in terms of prioritizing, I want to make sure that you're not doing work for things that, again, may be a later phase. And so I think once we agree on what we want to prioritize, and that's when we should do the more deeper work around strategies and initiatives, so that, no effort is being wasted, at this stage. So that's the only kind of note I have. But other than that, this looks good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In general, it seems very aligned, but I would rather a vote of affirmation than silence and assumptions.
All right. If nothing else, seeing no more matters before us, we are adjourned. You got one other thing?
I was just going to say, I want to make sure, though, that we're getting all strategies listed. It's just the amount of detail that we're getting for each one of those.
Right, yeah.
So things aren't falling away.
Yeah,
It's just
exactly.
like the top priority ones are more detailed, and as we move further into the 10 years, they become less and less detailed.
Yeah, because I thought we already summarized the strategy. Have we not done that for all the strategy initiatives?
No, we have done that. And if during this process there's any reason that staff suggests a strategy being dropped, it won't just be dropped. It'll be included in the memo and an explanation.
I just think it's important, though, so that we don't
Yeah.
lose track of them as we're looking at this stuff.
For
We
sure.
know these things are also included.
Thank you for flagging.
All right, everybody, have a good evening. Thank you.